Okay. First of all, do you think it'd be worth it to take the AIRS training? And that was the reference for information and referral. That reference that I had on that slide is actually from Roger Howard from Boise, Idaho, my cohort in crime in a lot of these webinars. And he really believes in it. And I know that I've heard great things about AIRS. I don't really know much about it myself, and we don't use it at Ability 360. So
the acronym?
I don't know it.
The Association of Information and Referral Systems. So, and Roger Howard is the executive director of Link in Boise, Idaho, and he and Nickel actually worked together with AIRS on that project.
So I think an answer to that question, though, take a look at it, and if it fits the needs and use for you, then go ahead and use it. And if you feel otherwise, then at least you're better informed. Another one is, how do your SILs count diversions? And we're going to talk about that, I believe, tomorrow. So stay tuned, stay here, don't leave early. Next one, are there any SILs that do not do home visits? Interesting question. I think most of us would agree that doing home visits is really important, because if you're doing like cooking skills and home safety and organizational skills, you gotta be in the home. You can't be in your office. And I think providing services anywhere in the community is important, and it really depends on the topic in which you're discussing. Now, as an example, we do cooking skills at our center, and that's great. It's very beneficial. But if you're actually taking it to the streets, the Doobie Brothers used to say, then you got to be in the home, because that way you know the accessibility and what they're working with and the layout, and maybe it's a matter of reorganizing their kitchen or different things. You got to do the home visit. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to perhaps run into some neighborhoods that are maybe really questionable, and quite honestly. And so therefore you just have to be smart and be aware of your surroundings with your car and your person as you go to do home visits. So, like you do, at a ball game or the mall, you just be aware of your surroundings these days. So do those home visits. Let's see. Our SIL does fairly well once we get the phone calls, but in the last 6 months, we've seen a big drop in the number of calls coming in, hurting our INR numbers. Do you have any suggestions to bring in more calls? Well, I think there was some talk yesterday about the way that we do business on the web or Facebook or those types of social media things. Having a hit on your Facebook is not an INR. It's not. And if you count the number of hits on your Facebook or on your web page as an INR, you're not accurately counting your numbers. And you need to change the way you count. Period. Drop mic. You need to have a response to those requests. You need to have some type of response to those requests, because that is an INR. You are giving information or referring to other agencies or other resources. That is an INR. Now, again, understand what I'm saying. The request and the question can come from Facebook or from your web page. That's great. That's a different means of reaching out. And you use that technology in social media. But to just say that is an INR, you got to stop counting those. So you need a response. And that is it for me. Okay, I'll take it. I got it.
In regards to the INRs on the website, I was told that your newsletter was also an INR. No one said anything different, that your newsletter is also sharing information. Well, it's information.
Information and referral is giving information to a specific person or helping a specific person make a referral. Even if you don't know their name, and sometimes I know you don't, you have to have a one-to-one connection. Now, you still can count those other things as part of your information that you give about what your center does for outreach. And so in your 704 report for outreach, but you cannot use newsletters as INRs.
So where are you getting your information?
From the current people, Karina Stiles.
Okay, I'll talk to Corrine.
Yeah, I mean, if you're sending out 5,000 newsletters a month, that's not 5,000 INRs.
Okay, so the first question, we did talk about intersectionality yesterday. The question came up again in terms of intersectionality and mission creep. And we talked about it in terms of advocacy, but I think overall from a perspective from a center, our mission statement doesn't have an asterisk on it that says, unless you're a person of color, queer, woman, it's all people with disabilities that we're serving and that we are there to support. I think it's important that our center recognize that multiply marginalized people face all sorts of other types of discrimination that multiply that experience and the oppression. So for me, it's not mission creep that we're actually out there putting out these messages saying, trying to be affirmatively acting in a way that actually supports folks, because that is our mission. And if we aren't actually hiring people of color, having our materials available in other languages, being representative of queer folks, and having that out there in a very public way, we're missing the boat in serving a whole segment, parts of our community. And that's not meeting our mission. It's not mission creep. We're not fulfilling our mission. Did you want to?
I just wanted to add one thing. I mean, your summary was perfect. But if this concept is new to you, or you're struggling to understand it, or if it really strikes an interest for you, we have done a number of introductory trainings on this. In fact, we did one last year on intersectionality. It's a 90-minute webinar. You can access it on ILRU's website, just like the other resources, and it's a great primer on this if you want more detail.
But I think this is a conversation that has to happen in your individual centers. And if you don't have people of color, multiply marginalized people with disabilities represented throughout the organization, then you're not able to actually have a full conversation on this. And I encourage folks to just take a look at yourself. And even when you think you're doing it right, you can always do more and do better. And that's sort of where I'm at on that. Moving ahead, how do you work with someone who isn't good with documentation but is good with their consumers? Oh my God. So this is reality. I keep trying to remind people, this is a big issue in our home care services. We hire attendants who are good at providing attendance services, and the nurses are very frustrated because they don't write a really good note that talks about what goal they're working on and how that plays out. And I keep reminding everyone, these are two completely different skill sets. The people who are good at writing these notes are not necessarily the same people who are good at delivering service. That said, you have to document what you do. And I think for me, we've done a series of things, from identifying more concrete approaches to giving people, first we look at access barriers. Is there an access barrier that's preventing you from doing your notes? And then we'll change things up. We don't even call it a reasonable accommodation. We just start changing things up to make sure that there's a way for the person to do their notes and document their services in a way that makes sense. And that'll include, they can put it in whatever format they like, and clerical people will reconfigure it. And that's kind of worked well, because we've had someone who actually wrote, Bonnie called, she wanted a Valium, I got her one. And what she actually meant was, She wanted a vacuum. The clerical people came and said, I think we should really look at this note. I'm not sure that this is okay to do. And like we went back and she's like, oh, it was a vacuum. I'm like, and what we've done is sort of escalate the process for folks. Ronnie talked about, I think it was, I don't know, sacred hour at the end of the week. Sometimes people need something a little more concrete than an hour at the end of the week. They may need specific time each day. They may need specific blocks of time, multiple blocks during the day. And I know as someone who struggled to get his homework done, it was my mother saying, you will sit there until this is done, that got it done for me. So sometimes you need to do that. So look at all of these various options. I personally don't like going to where someone else will actually do all of the writing for the person. I think documenting your work is an essential job function. So I tend not to go that far, but I know that's an individual decision. So there's a lot of things you can do, and I'm happy to talk to folks about specific struggles, but it's something we all share. The Underground Railroad. So the question came up about folks going to Colorado, Denver. Folks from Atlantis community are here, so Robbie, so if you are interested in this, Robbie from Denver can talk to you. The issue came up, they were talking about housing, though, as being the barrier they're facing. Reality check, housing is a barrier all over, and Denver, it is a huge barrier to community integration. So I tend not to think of the Underground Railroad as a solution to the housing problem as much as it is the service delivery problem. So that a state that just doesn't provide the type of service, that's where we're using that. If you have housing issues, I think, again, that's something you really do have to work on locally. I had a question about the pooled trust. So the question is, was this pool you speak of, and how can I learn more? If you go to the CDR website, pooled supplemental community needs trust, some combination of those words is one of the services that we deliver. It is a mechanism in New York that allows people to put their surplus income into a trust. We pay their bills for them. They choose whatever they want us to pay. As long as it's legal, we'll pay it within the guidelines. And if they want to buy something else, we explain to them how they can do that. But it is a unique model. It's unique to New York, as you've seen. One Medicaid program is one Medicaid program. You need to look at what's being done in your state, what's available. But it is an incredible thing that allows disabled people to have resources that they need to live in the community while getting Medicaid to support the services and supports that allow them to live in the community.
Would that be similar to the ABLE account?
It's a similar kind of thing. There's no age. The ABLE account had an age limit on it, so there's no age limit on this in New York. So the specific reason we went with a pool trust was elderly individuals could actually go into this in New York. So look to see what options are available. They have to be run by nonprofits in New York. It's maybe a specific thing to us. I haven't researched other states because, frankly, we can't. Okay, so the issue is it is a Medicaid mechanism. The question is, do you take people from out of state? There's no reason someone would do that because our trust is a mechanism in New York for people to qualify for Medicaid. So you really do need to look at what the systems are in your state that'll actually you could do if you can do this. And we're happy. We worked with, to get started on it, we actually identified a Medicaid lawyer who did a lot of individual trusts, and he helped us navigate this process because he said there were people who just had a little bit of money that would make a huge difference in their lives, which meant they couldn't afford to set up their own trust and hire a lawyer, and he was trying to figure out a way to help them without actually, so he's a good guy. And then there was a question about, in a fee-for-service environment that doesn't cover costs, do staff resolve problems through systems advocacy? I'm not sure if I'm going to answer the question correctly, so or fully. So if I don't get there for whoever asked that, service. Oh, do you want to? Well, I'll start. So for us, some fee for service just doesn't cover their costs, and that's really a very strategic decision that an organization needs to make. Do you actually provide that? Sometimes it's very mission, it's important for the organization to do. I know I've started things or done things that didn't cover themselves because it was really important to us, and we wanted to invest the money. Sometimes you don't, you look at something and you say it's really going to lose us so much money, we just can't do it. And that's really a very strategic decision. Whether the dollars and something, whether the funding streams support themselves, staff are all using systems advocacy to solve problems. So it does actually pay off for us in the end. Like when we push a policy and get change. I think a good example of that is with our pooled trust. Some individuals had to monthly certify that their money was going into the account. And what that was doing was creating a lag between the first of the month and when they would actually get their Medicaid turned on, and it was causing problems for their services. We went systematically county by county getting them to shift their policy for everyone. So that was a way we utilized. So thanks, Daryl.
So this is Ronnie. Good morning. Yay. What I'm experiencing as the director over the one-to-one service side is the staff who have the skill set maybe to move somebody out and find an apartment, make those kind of schmoozy connections to help accept somebody with a criminal background, credit issues, accessibility needs, may not, because there's pressure to like move 8 people a month to meet cost, that when there's a situation of discrimination, they just move on. Like they don't always report back to me so that I can then refer it over to the legal department who does fair housing testing to go test that, property manager, landlord, realtor to nail them for that practice. And I feel like my methodology has been to, like that's cute. Did you hear that duck? That was super cute. So then my approach has been like, well, hopefully I can try to train them on understanding the bigger picture, to get them, because that worked for me to be really jazzed up and passionate about this larger issue for disabled people need to be integrated. But it's not working, I think, because I also am at the same time, out of my mouth is coming, did you guys move 8 people or not? Because the vice president's asking me, the board's asking me, that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of trying to figure that out. Does that make,
That's
okay?
a great question. And honestly, it's where I understand the bind you're in because you need to meet your program deliverables. But I also think that there is a responsibility on the advocacy side of the organization to actually follow through. So one of the things I find is that people tend to do things they find work. So if you do something and it doesn't work, you're like, I'm not doing that again. Which is why I talk about answering the phone and connecting with people up front is really important because we don't want people to get that experience of like it didn't work and they'll never call us back again. The same for staff. I think if you are referring things over to the advocates or however that's defined, internally the program people are the customer, and being responsive to that and reporting back and engaging them in that process, even if it's just an in the hallway kind of, thanks for sharing that information, we've got people who are working on it kind of thing, or we utilize our staff meetings publicly to sort of thank folks for that kind of stuff. So that kind of internal responsiveness, I think, is the thing that drives that. All right, and I think those are mine. Is that okay? I'm sorry. Good?
Yeah, the legal department is not okay. So.
No.
Hey everyone, good morning. So there was a question about a certain state that might not fall under that requirement, the 51% requirement for management, staff, and board due to privacy issues. To be clear, and I'm going to answer kind of the first part of this with a couple pieces of information, and then Bruce is going to follow up with some more. There's nothing that we talked about this one at length. There's nothing that we know of in that state or any other that would supersede that 51% requirement. To be clear, we're not talking about forced disclosure, right? It's the right of a person with a disability to decide whether or not they disclose they have a disability. We're not saying that that forced disclosure is happening at the door, but that's something that we attend to at our individual centers to make sure that we are indeed run by people with disabilities, right? The piece of information in there that seemed to apply, and it may not, it may be helpful for other folks anyway, is Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act was bolstered by some 2014 regulations that were added for federal contractors. Some of you may be aware of that 7% requirement that federal contractors were obligated to meet that minimum minority ratio. 7% with disability, 7% of their staff had to be people with disabilities. This was, we thought maybe some of the confusion here could have come from the fact that around this time last year, President Trump's administration rescinded an executive order from President Obama that put teeth to that, right? The regulations themselves on Section 503 in terms of that 7% requirement don't really have any teeth, but there was an executive order from President Obama that really put teeth on what it would look like if you didn't do that as a federal contractor. That executive order was rescinded, right? So it's still in the regulations for Section 503. The Department of Labor still has all its guidance up on their website. This is still something that federal contractors should be doing. Really, most folks that are receiving any kind of federal money should be doing. It's not real clear on who's going to go after them if they don't. And I'm going to, what's that? And our regs are still very clear on what centers are obligated to do in terms of their staffing.
And I just wanted to highlight, when we talk about privacy rights, and I understand health disclosures are something that people are considering very private, but we are a disability organization run by people with disabilities, and we don't want to be in a position where we're reinforcing the ableism out there that disability is something, it's inconsistent to be proud of who you are as a person with a disability and in a position where you're hiding it. And some people can, some people can't. As someone who potentially can, we have some conversations in our center very publicly in our leadership training for folks in the community and within our staff about the concept of passing, what that means in terms of an ability to sort of move about in the general world and not be subject to bias, but also the soul-sucking experience of passing and how you're denying a part of who you are. And I think what I want to just reinforce is that we really do, as organizations, want to promote disability pride and be a place where people feel very comfortable self-disclosing. And if they don't feel comfortable self-disclosing, we need to look at what we're doing that creates that environment. And there are lots of good reasons I can tell, and I think I used an example earlier. I was concerned about publicly sharing that I was face blind because it could be potentially used against me down the road. That's all a very real thing, but you can actually find lines where you can be self-disclosing without putting yourself at risk. I moved it a little further because I feel like it's worth it to the community.
All right. So I had a question. Kimberly, do you do 100% follow-up on your INRs? Do you let the callers know that that a follow-up call would be made? Do you use Sil Suites to log INR? Or do you have another database? So we do 100% follow-up for all of our information referral calls. We do establish a timeline with our consumers when we talk with them, and so we'll ask questions. Well, how long do you think are you going to be contacting your referral source today or tomorrow? And then it also establishes some accountability with the consumer as well. You're letting them know that you're going to check on them and kind of giving them that first step to make that call. We do track our INR through seal sweets, but we also have a document that it's our call log, and it says the name of the individual, the county that they're calling from, and then how the call was handled, and that goes back to the supervisor monthly during the monthly audits, and so we kind of track to see how calls are being handled and kind of what kind of calls we're receiving, because that also gives us an idea of what's going on in the community. Another one, our community service board doesn't always play well with other agencies. Do you have any icebreakers to get them on board? So collaboration is a difficult thing sometimes. Collaboration is all about building those relationships and then also understanding that conflict may happen within the collaboration. To getting everyone to play nice with you, continue to be at that table. Continue to share how you can benefit that collaboration and how you want to work with them to further what that group is working on. I do a lot of one-on-one meetings with some agencies that I feel like maybe aren't understanding what we're doing. And so maybe reaching out to the lead of that committee and getting them, start talking to them about what you can bring to the table and how you have a shared interest in the group. That usually works. But and also understanding that not everyone is going to agree with you, but you can also agree to disagree sometimes. But don't let go of what we're fighting for. Paula?
One of the things that we wanted to kind of jump in and share with you is that we have technical assistance calls. So in addition to these conversations that we have here, which are wonderful, isn't it great to be able to connect with other people who do the job that you do? We also have monthly technical assistance calls for new executive directors, for associate or assistant or program manager or whatever you call your middle management staff. And I see some nods, and I know some of you have been on some of those calls. We have them for financial managers. We have them for silks. And we have them for your DSE. Now, not all of those are monthly, but if your DSE is giving you any trouble, it might be interesting for them to know about these calls. So if you would like to get on the list or put somebody on the list for any of those calls, just get your card or a piece of paper and tell us your email address and your name and your title, and we'll see that you are able to jump into those calls. So those are technical assistance calls. We also have a technical assistance blog. So the questions that I get the regulation questions. They're not very interesting, and sometimes when I have to give you all the regulations and the specific references for where something is stated in the regulations, it gets kind of old. But I do try to take whatever your questions are and translate those into a blog post that comes out actually every week, with very few exceptions. So if you're interested in that, same thing, give me your name and I'll give you my card. I've got my card, has the blog on it, and you can go in, and if you subscribe, you'll get a little ping to your email about the topic that's that week, and you can decide if you want to go over and read that topic or not. The topics are all over the map. Some of them are for fiscal people, some of them are for silks, but there are always some that are also for all of you that are here. So hopefully you'll take advantage of some of those other technical assistance opportunities.